In just 3 years, a small mining community in southeastern Arizona would experience a bizarre UFO sighting, one of the most bitter mining strikes in the region, and a devastating flood that nearly wiped the town off the map. Deep in the mountains of eastern Arizona, along the narrow San Francisco River, and along Route 666, which has since been retired, sit two communities that have always been tied to one thing: copper. Clifton and Morenci. These weren't quiet little desert towns. They were, and still are, hardworking mining communities where the mine wasn't just a source of jobs, it was a way of life. Generations of families lived, worked, and raised children there. But by the early 1980s, something was changing. Something they couldn't identify. Something that, according to witnesses, didn't look like an airplane. They believed they had seen a UFO. It was around 9 o'clock on a cool October night in 1980. Five miners were on their way to their lunch break in Morenci, Arizona. It was just another night at the copper mine. Then, they looked up. What they saw was something they couldn't explain. A massive object was moving through the night sky, right above the mine. The five miners described it as being boomerang-shaped, solid black, with 8 rows of lights on each wing, and one single white light on the nose of the craft. According to their account, it wasn't small. They estimated the object to be about a quarter mile long. The craft was reportedly flying only 700 to 1,000 feet over one of the now retired smelters. The craft then suddenly shot a bright light directly down into the smelter and proceeded to fly over another smelter and do the exact same thing. Then something happened that made the sight even stranger. In the blink of an eye, the craft shot away into the distance, but instead of continuing its course, it then reversed its direction and came back. The five miners had now witnessed something large moving over one of the biggest mine operations in the world. But the story didn't end there. The craft was reportedly seen again, but this time it wasn't over the mine. It was then seen over the Morenci High School football field while practice was taking place. The descriptions were remarkably unusual. A massive boomerang-shaped craft moving silently and slowly through the night, and capable of shooting away in the blink of an eye and reversing direction right back. So what exactly did those people see? Was it an aircraft, a strange atmospheric phenomenon, a misidentified object, or something else? For a moment, the strange UFO sighting over Morenci was just that, strange. But just 3 years later, the people of Morenci and Clifton would have something else much bigger to worry about. Now, copper just wasn't simply an industry here, it was the lifeblood of the community. Thousands of people depended on the mine. Families had built their entire lives around it. But on June 30th of 1983, a labor dispute between Phelps Dodge Corporation and the miners would push the community to the breaking point. The workers went on strike, and what started as a labor dispute quickly became something much bigger. Phelps Dodge brought in replacement workers, and for the striking miners, that changed everything. They weren't just strangers crossing a picket line. They were people coming into a town where workers had raised their families for generations. Tensions exploded. Arguments turned into confrontations. Confrontations turned violent, and strikers and replacement workers clashed in the streets. Soon, law enforcement was called in to control the situation. The message was clear: the replacement workers were not welcome. According to accounts, it all came to head when roughly 100 miners, or strikers, lined up outside the Phelps Dodge gates carrying chains and baseball bats, and they weren't there for a peaceful demonstration. The state police and Phelps Dodge knew at this point that the situation was dire, and they would soon be overrun. They were greatly outnumbered. The governor of Arizona then responded by sending in additional state police as well as the National Guard. For striking miners, this became more than just a dispute. They believed the company was taking their livelihoods away from them, and many felt that Phelps Dodge was abusing its enormous power. The strike wasn't just affecting those who worked at the mine, It affected wives, children, businesses, police officers, soldiers, and families were under financial pressure. And the violence surrounding the mine became part of everyday life. But there was something no one had predicted. While the people of Clifton and Morenci were fighting a corporation, something else was coming. Just a few months later, the fall of 1983 would bring another disaster. Not one caused by Phelps Dodge, not one caused by the miners, and not one that could be stopped by the police or a picket line. October 1st, 1983. What began as a quiet day in Clifton would turn into something no one would ever forget. In the Pacific, Hurricane Octave had formed off the southern Mexico coast. It never made direct landfall in Arizona, but it didn't need to. The storm pulled massive amounts of tropical moisture north and upward, feeding a system of heavy rain over the region. And that rain found its way into the San Francisco River. The river rose steadily, then rapidly. Within hours, the San Francisco River surged to nearly 90,000 cubic feet per second, a flow powerful enough to reshape the entire valley. At first, the river stayed within its banks, but the ground was already saturated, and the current was only getting stronger. Then came the trees. Entire trees, weakened by the floodwaters, began to break free along the riverbanks. Carried downstream, they then slammed into the San Francisco Bridge. One by one, they piled beneath it until the river had nowhere left to go. What formed beneath the bridge was essentially a dam of debris, a blockage made of trees, mud, and wreckage. And in a matter of moments, the river changed direction. It spilled over its banks and into Clifton. At first, it was just streets, then homes, then entire blocks. The water moved fast, too fast for evacuation. Cars were swept away. Buildings were torn open. Entire structures lifted from their foundations. In total, 700 homes were destroyed. And out of the 126 businesses in Clifton, 86 were completely wiped out. Where the storefronts once stood, there was only mud, broken glass, and water. And yet, miraculously, there were no reported deaths. Not a single life lost. In the middle of the destruction, the community did what it had always done. It held on. Neighbors helped neighbors, families climbed to higher ground, and people waited for water to fall. But when it finally did, Clifton was never the same. Entire sections of town were left in ruins. Some businesses were rebuilt, many were not. And even decades later, remnants of the flood can still be seen. Clifton today is still standing, but for many who lived through that time, they would say that Clifton and Morenci are now a shadow of what they once were. In 1994, in response to the devastation, giant floodgates were built, a promise that if the river ever rose again, they would be prepared. Today, Clifton and Morenci are still there, and the mine is still very much part of the landscape. The San Francisco River still runs through the valley, and the mountains that surround the community watched it all happen. But if you know where to look, you can still find reminders of those years. The places where clashes unfolded, the areas where picket lines once stood fast, the streets where floodwaters rushed through the town, and the stories passed down by the people who were there. And somewhere in those stories is the strangest one of all. Miners and students watching something enormous move silently through the night sky. 3 years, 3 extraordinary events, and one unforgettable chapter in Arizona history. The governor hurricane endowed with 100 of the 100. The storm pulled trap. Motherfucker.